This week on the Frame Savers, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it. Nailed it. They could call me up. I could help them out.
Please, I really hope they don't sue us for that, but that's
Yeah,
fine.
please don't sue us, McDonald's. We're advertising for you for free.
I don't know if I go that far.
So this is episode 69 of the Frame Savers. If you're new to the podcast, we are a retro video game podcast that focuses on speedrunning. Speedrunning is a hobby in which you try and beat video games as quickly as possible using whatever glitches and tricks that you have available to you. It's a lot of fun, so hopefully you enjoy it. This is part of our Bad Games series. This is episode 69. We haven't done a Bad Games episode in a while, I feel like. Have we?
Yeah, we've sort of like had this long run of uncharacteristically good games we've been talking about, and it's almost like
It
we
feels
forgot
wrong.
we forgot our roots.
Yeah.
So we penciled one in. We said, you know what, episode 69, it's got to be a Bad Games episode. Let's do it.
Yeah. It feels wrong in preparation of the podcast playing something that I enjoy. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that this week that I got to at least suffer a little bit. So this week we are talking about McDonald's games. So a bunch of different McDonald's based video games. Yes, there are more than one. And so we're going to have a ton of fun doing that. We are live right now here on twitch.tv/theframesavers, hanging out with you guys and gals. Thank you so much for coming. So what have you been up to, Off?
Well, I've been out of town this weekend, but before that, I have been playing a weird cross-section of games. I've unfortunately still been playing A Link to the Past. I've been playing some Pugsy. That game actually just got accepted into Keysathon, so I'm gonna be racing it as of recording this next weekend. But if you're listening to the audio version, sorry, you're too late. But
Unless you have a time machine or something.
if you have a time machine, hit me up.
Yeah.
Hit me up right this second. You can be on the episode.
You could do it. Yeah,
If
you
you-
can be on this episode.
If you appear right now in my apartment, I've got a chair right next to me over here. You can be on the episode. No problem.
Yeah.
Other than
I
that,
guess-
no, I've
I
just been
guess
playing a
you
few
have
games. I've been playing some Deponia casually. Nothing really new to report, I guess. How about you? What you been playing?
Your weird click adventure fetish continues.
Yeah.
Strange love of those games. I've mostly been doing Link to the Past. We've been doing the tournament that started out, so we've been having a lot of fun doing our races in that. So I've been doing a bit of that, and then I learned Super Mario Land for the Game Boy. So that's been a
Nice.
lot of fun.
How have you been enjoying Super Mario Land?
It's a lot of fun. I got like a 14, 16, so like finally like an okay-ish time. I'm gonna shoot for the sub 13 probably, but it's a lot of fun. It's a
Yeah,
really
I
good
ran
game.
that
Great music.
Forever ago, but I really enjoyed it. It's not an easy speed
did
run.
bop you. I did bop you.
Oh,
I'm
for
ready
sure.
for you to come back. I'm ready for you to come back to the game.
Yeah, I gotta.
Waiting for you. Yeah. You can't let me bop you. So if people wanted to see other speedrunning events, there's some stuff going on. Want you get them up to date?
Yeah, so as of this episode coming out live, you should definitely check out Retrothon on RGL going on right now. So that's twitch.tv/retrogaminglivetv. So that'll be running from April 22nd to the 29th. And that's just a big cross-section, a lot of days in a row of 24/7 awesome retro games. So if you need your fix...
Atari to Dreamcast, something like that. So
Yeah,
it's a big...
That was kind of the
range
slogan they were
system.
going for, was Atari
Yeah.
to Dreamcast. There's a lot of games, a lot of people running in that marathon. It's not just speedruns. There are going to be a lot of speedruns, but it's not just that. So if you want to see, people playing games that they love at any speed, definitely check it out.
Sure. We've got the mid-spring speed fling coming up, April 28th to the 29th. That sounds like a prom or like a homecoming dance, and like I really want an invite to the mid-spring speed fling. I feel weird that I don't have a date to it.
Yeah, I
yet.
kind of
Like, should I feel
So
is my popularity going down? I'm scared.
it's the Midwest Speed Fest, guys, and I commend them on their dedication to having every event rhyme in this way. They had the Midwinter Speed Sprinter as well. So I mean, they're doing great work out there. I got to be honest with you. It's April 28th and 29th. It's an on-site event. It's twitch.tv/Midwest Speedfest, I believe. You can find all these events and they'll have a lot fewer maybes on our calendar, which you can find at is.gd/speedrun events, or check out our Discord server for more information. There's also one more big one coming up real soon. What's that, John?
So RPG Limit Break 2018 will be May 13th to the 20th. That's a big marathon filled with RPG runs. A lot of these marathons don't get a lot of RPG runs accepted into them, like the GDQs and some other stuff. A lot of more like adventure and platforming based games seem more popular. So this is a cool opportunity to kind of highlight a whole range of RPG speedruns that you might not get to see in other events. That's really cool. So also, if you join our Discord, Chad worked really hard on this really cool bot that we have in there that is constantly posting what stuff you could be watching live in terms of these events and stuff like that. So he used the dark wizardry of computers to make it do that. I don't know. I think it's AI. Elon Musk told me that he didn't like the bot being in our Discord, so I don't know. I don't get how it works.
Yeah,
But
next thing I'm going to do
cool.
is I'm going to send a Framesaver's car into space.
Yes. So that is all the rage. So join that. There are maybe people who are newer to our podcast, and they might be wondering, why are you talking about bad games? So why have we done 9 episodes of this now?
Because we hate ourselves and we need to be punished.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, me and John, I think one of the things that first drew us to each other, as far as you know,
It
sort of
was looks first.
yeah. I mean, it was a primal instinct to start with, but after a while, we discovered we actually had a few things in common. One of which being a love of the obscure and arguably bad games. And so we kind of put on these episodes because it's really easy in a podcast of this format to really stick to the mainstream big name titles. Fingers crossed we've gone this far and we haven't talked about Ocarina of Time yet. So I'm just saying, we're doing our due diligence. 9 episodes of bad games and still no Ocarina of Time. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's a lot of fun talking about these games. I when I started this podcast and thought of the idea and started with Chad, one of the things I did is I wanted to do it because I listened to a lot of podcasts that talk about retro gaming, but not necessarily speedrunning. But on the flip side of that, like a lot of those podcasts don't get to talk, like we'll never talk about these games. And so that's what I think's a lot of fun about it. You can go find another podcast, even if it's not about speedrunning, about Link to the Past or Super Mario Brothers 2, but you're not going to find one about McDonald's games. You're not going to find one about Barbie Game Girl. And so I think that's fun. I like it. And a lot of these games have really cool speedrun merit. So there's a lot of cool stuff to dive into. So we're going to take a quick break, listen to some fresh Mickey D's music, and then come back. So we're excited this week to talk about bad games, specifically McDonald's games. And much like playing these games comes with a lot of shame, so does eating McDonald's food. I think they come one and the same, right? Like you're never proud that you just ate McDonald's like 20 minutes later.
I've never seen anyone post on their Instagram, at least.
Yeah, like no one's ever posting their Big Mac on Instagram. It's always like their fancy frou-frou foods. But a lot of us like this kind of food sometimes, and so I figured we could talk about what our favorite menu items are. What's your favorite stuff from the Mickey D's?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, it's so hard to say. I hate it all equally. But when I eat there, it's definitely like just a double cheese. They have the world's best fries. Okay,
Okay. Yeah, they're good.
I can hate on McDonald's for a lot of things, but they do have the best fries in the biz. Um, I'm sorry for all the people who are now leaving our podcast because of that hot opinion, but they do have the
Do you
best.
like the soggier fries or the crispier fries?
I mean, I don't want them to be soggy, but I don't want them to be overcooked.
See, at McDonald's, I do want them to be soggy. That's why I like to get the small if I go there because it has more of like the soggy
Yikes.
fries. Is that weird?
Yeah, a little bit.
And then I dip it in sweet and sour sauce, which is probably also weird.
Actually, this is probably a good point to bring up. Every single year, every time they bring back the McRib, I say to myself, you know, I should try that again. And every single time, I'm very mad at myself that I do. Every time I put it into my mouth and the first bite and I say, this was a mistake. This was a big one.
I can understand that. I think I've had that same thing with like fillet of fish a few times where I wanted a fillet of fish and then I'm like, I don't know why I wanted the fillet of fish. I like the McDouble. The McDouble's a strong option. Also, the breakfast is obviously very good. You know, the biscuit, bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit. You can't go wrong with that. Very good. So I don't know. Milkshakes are good.
They do have good milk. There's a lot of
Yeah.
good things on the menu, but overall, I
are.
just don't want to go there.
Yeah. Well, I just figured we could touch base on that, get to know us a little bit better in our depravity. But what like let's say I was a kid and like you wanted to reach me and get me to eat McDonald's. You know, we're talking about all the tastes and stuff. What would you maybe do? Would you make like a video game or something? Or
That seems like a poor business choice.
oh, okay. So then nobody would have done that in the past.
Yeah, except for
Okay.
this is what we're calling the segue.
That's what I was going for, but I
Okay.
guess it was.
All right. Well, let's kick it off. So,
are we doing well at this segue or?
well, I think it's a bit on the nose at this point. So, the whole premise for this episode is on McDonald's games specifically, but McDonald's didn't introduce the idea of what are referred to as adver games. This goes back pretty far. With the 2600, there was a game called Kool-Aid Man. It was also on.
That sounds awesome.
Was it on Intellivision or ColecoVision?
ColecoVision, maybe?
Yeah, it was on one of those. There were a few others. There was a game for Purina Dog Chow. And,
really?
Yeah, but there were
But
all
your
these
dog
games.
doesn't get to play. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know. That
it's
just
very
seems
weird.
confusing.
So the idea behind these games isn't necessarily like to convince you that you should be buying the product. Conceivably, if you're buying the game, it's because you already have some familiarity with the product. I think the idea more has to do with just raising brand awareness, making people sort of associate the brand with positive ideas, positive memories. And so when you're at the store and you're comparing between two items, you pick the one that's associated with more positive memories. So, I'm going to buy my Kool-Aid over what is the competitor for Kool-Aid?
Nothing.
There's no one to compete against.
Sugar and water.
Why is Kool-Aid advertising anything? They have won the battle. There's no one.
They've done it. They've done it. There's probably generic Kool-Aid that you still just end up buying because it's 5 cents cheaper. So maybe that's what they're going for. I don't know. Hawaiian Punch, what's said in chat? That's I guess Capri Sun. Capri Sun's a little bit of a,
Yeah,
just saying, it's possible. Gatorade.
All right, I guess so. So there's a few notable examples of some adver games historically. I think one of the ones that people remember really fondly is Chex Quest. Which, what makes Chex Quest particularly interesting, first off, is it was the first game to actually ever be included with the product. Which I think is made a lot easier by the fact it was a CD-ROM game. I mean, how hard is it to just slide that into the box? But even like with Kool-Aid Man, you had to either send off, I think it was like 125 proofs of purchase, or later it was actually sold retail. Which I think 125 proofs of purchase for Kool-Aid might have actually been cheaper, but... I mean, if you just think about it. But the other interesting thing about the Chex Quest game is that while it's easy to remark that it looks a lot like a Doom game, it actually is built on the actual Doom engine. Which
Do you think it fits in the lore at some point, or? So
you're saying that the Doom guy at some point took a quick trip to the planet Chex to
could be a
whatever
prequel,
it is.
Could be a reimagining. I don't know.
Whatever it is you do in Chex Quest.
Alternate timeline.
That's true. Maybe it was his brother.
Yeah, the child's timeline or whatever.
Yeah, but they licensed the Doom engine, which was, I guess interpreted as more or less obsolete at the time, since Quake was already quickly gaining popularity,
Mhm.
but they licensed it from id Software for a pretty affordable price as well. I think that's one of the more impressive things is you would think they'd be like General Mills. They've got lots of money, but they apparently got a good deal on the engine and used it to produce what is now considered a relatively popular game. It still has something of a cult following to this day.
Yeah, I've never seen or played Chex Quest. I've always been intrigued by it, so I need to check this out because I love Doom. Also Sneak King, really popular one. So this was part of a series of Burger King games that were available for $3.99 with the purchase of a kid's meal, which is how they rip you off because there's no food in a kid's meal. It's literally a cardboard box with no food in it. And I didn't know this. I thought this was super interesting that Chad found this. These were the best-selling games of the 2006 holiday season, selling over 3.2 million copies in USA and Canada. That's crazy.
They sold an Xbox 360 game for $3.99.
Yeah,
I mean,
so I guess it's just, but it's still like you wouldn't think it would be the best-selling game of the holiday season. Really not doing much. Like Call of Duty couldn't outsell Sneak King. I
there were
don't know.
two other
That's
games in
crazy.
this series which I think
Yeah,
kind of helped the numbers as well. There was like a
Kart
BMX
Racer, I
game.
think. Oh
One of
no,
them was a BMX game. I know that.
okay.
I don't remember what the other one was. You may be right. It might have been a kart racer. But the Sneak King one was definitely, as far as I remember, more popular, and I think actually has a little bit of speedrun attention too. I think people have speedrun Sneak King. I remember
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, it was at the GDQ. It's
Oh,
a
that's
pretty
right.
interesting speed run.
That's right.
Uh, it's a strange speed run. It's always been kind of intriguing to me. You also got the America's Army developed a U.S. Army game to boost recruitment numbers. I think I
Yeah.
heard about this back in the day.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe the game. It I remember downloading it and playing the beginning of it because it was sort of a phenomenon at the time. But I don't remember playing it enough to sort of discover what type of game it was. It was certainly a
Hmm.
first-person shooter, but it seemed like it was sort of towing the line between first-person shooter and MMO. I couldn't
Okay.
quite put my finger on what it was, but it's sort of interesting because when you think of adver games, you typically think of selling a product. But America's Army, and there was actually one that was made by Hezbollah as well that was advertising like their army. Like, not to
Hmm.
sort of dive in that direction, but
Yeah. Yeah.
America's Army wasn't the only one that did this,
Yeah.
making a
Yeah.
video game that was sort of selling the idea of joining the army
Yeah.
and the tenets
Interesting.
thereof.
Would you consider, is there a difference in adver games between like something like this and like say the Cheetos games on SNES or Yonoid? Are those considered adver games as well?
Oh, they absolutely are.
Yeah. Okay.
I think to a certain extent you could make the argument that some of them do a worse job of selling their product. Like, I'm not sure that for instance, I'm not sure that the Chester Cheetah games do a great job of selling
They
Cheetos
don't. They
to
do
you.
very little. They put very little Cheetos. I don't think the word Cheetos is like in the game almost at
Like, there's
all. It's
pickups,
very,
there's
yeah.
pickups in
But
the
they're,
game that are sort of shaped like the food item, but they definitely
yeah,
do a lot less than, for instance, the McDonald's games where in between levels sometimes you can
sure.
buy a burger or something like that.
Sure. And like
So
cool spots, like even better example of just like it is an advert game, but at the same time, like you barely know what it's advertising.
right.
So it's kind of interesting. So we've got these three or four. We're going to talk about one of them pretty briefly, but we're going to focus on three major McDonald's games, right? So the
Right.
first one we're going to be talking about is McDonald Land. This is a Famicom only game. Bummer, we didn't get this in the US, and it's a lot of fun. Do you want to talk about it? This is like one of your favorite games, right?
Yeah, Donald Land
Oh
is.
well, I'm sorry, Donald Land. We're going to talk about McDonald Land. That is what influences all of these. But yeah, Donald Land's the first game.
Yeah, so
We're
Donald
talking
Land.
about.
So Donald Land is sort of the first game on our list, and it's the first real advert game for McDonald's. They developed it in 1988. Data East published it, and it was only for the Famicom. And one of the interesting things about the game is that I think it's hard to identify looking at the name Donald Land that it was necessarily a McDonald's game.
Mhm.
But one of the reasons why there was sort of like a naming mix-up, and I think it's sort of an interesting story, is that in Japan, they actually don't call him Ronald McDonald. His name is actually Donald McDonald in
Sure.
Japan. And the reason for that actually is because the name of the man who brought the English language to Japan in like the 1800s, his name was Ranald McDonald. And so
Mhm.
when they brought McDonald's over to Japan, they picked a different name as to sort of avoid confusion. So they used
So
just Donald McDonald.
So did they feel like bringing English language to Japan was more important than selling cheeseburgers? Like that he deserved to hold this title of Ronald McDonald above the cheeseburger clown?
I guess there's sort of an interesting question to be asked. No, for real. I think there's an interesting question to be asked about whether or not they were doing it because they felt it would hurt their brand identity or whether or not it was out of respect. And, just thinking off the top of my head, McDonald's doesn't seem all about necessarily respecting other cultures. So I have to say that it probably had more to do with just trying to make sure that no one would confuse anything.
And so this is a pretty straightforward platformer, but all these games, what I was trying to lead to, and there's so many words, Donald and Land and Mick coming up, that it mixes all of them in my head. But McDonald Land is actually this fantasy world that basically all of these games take place in. And so this was used for marketing McDonald's restaurants, and it was inhabited by Ronald McDonald and all the other characters that you might have heard of, the Hamburglar and Grimace, the Bird Girl, the Fry Guys, all that is that fantasy world.
The gang's all here. That Fry dude and the ketchup as well.
They're literally called Fry Guys, to be fair.
Yeah, I know.
But this was created in 1970 for McDonald's by an advertising firm, and they actually got in a bit of trouble over this.
Yeah,
sued.
In 1973, they got sued by Sid and Marty Krofft for copyright infringement. They were actually the creators of H.R. Puffin Stuff, which was the name of a fictional mayor that was claimed to have been the basis for Mayor McCheese, and other characters within the H.R. Puffin Stuff universe were supposedly also infringed upon. So McDonald's was ordered to pay $50,000, but it was appealed by both parties. Both parties were unhappy with the arrangement, and so it got appealed all the way up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where in 1997 damages were reassessed in the favor of the Crofts for more than $1 million, which is a lesson to be learned. Which is a lesson to be learned. Never, don't give up even when you're ahead, McDonald's. They were unhappy with $50,000, and they said, "Nah, we're going to double down on this one." And so McDonald's was actually ordered to cease using many of the characters. So it's the story of what got used where is kind of interesting, because according to a lot of what I was reading, Mayor McCheese, which was the main character that was apparently infringed upon, what I was finding was he was actually still used in some advertisements leading all the way up to 1980, but apparently in 1977 they were ordered to cease using those characters. So, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that being both of them true.
Yeah, that's crazy. I just want to have you imagine that you went to law school, like at Harvard, like you're spending all this time diving into the law, learning about how to distribute justice, and then you're sitting in a courtroom being presented with the fact that Mayor McCheese is infringing on M.R. Puffin Stuff's intellectual property. Like that would just be, I would love to be in that courtroom and just hear them talk seriously about this topic. It's kind of hilarious. But a lot of the ones that you've heard of since then, the Grimaces and Ronald McDonald's and stuff, are the ones who survived this lawsuit. So they had to get rid of, I guess, a bunch of stuff that we would probably know about today if it weren't for this. So
yeah, I was actually looking it up because I was hoping I was right, and apparently I'm wrong. I was thinking that the name of the legal precedent actually had H.R. Puffin Stuff in the name, but it does not. And I'm very disappointed now because I was hoping that the legal precedent,
Puffin Stuff versus McCheese.
I was hoping that the legal precedent was going to be like like H.R. Puffin Stuff v. McDonald's Corporation or something.
Oh my gosh, that would be so good. It's got to be interesting being a judge in some of these cases. It's got to be kind of a humbling experience. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so Donald Land is probably your favorite of these three games, and it's a Famicom game. I mean, I guess I don't want to spoil your power rankings for later, but you've been excited about this game for a long time. I'll say that. It's been on your list.
It's a really cool speedrun, in my opinion, and I probably will pick it up sometime. As far as just like comparing the games outright, I guess you could really make an argument in a lot of cases about which one's the better one, but this is definitely the most straightforward platformer, which is something I really appreciate, the simplicity of platformers back in the Famicom era. It really didn't matter what the theme was, they all had the same sort of you start at the left, go to the right variety. And this game is about as straightforward as it comes, and despite the fact that I think if you play it, you'll have a good case of it being frustrating. Like if you want to argue that it's a frustrating game to play, I don't think anyone would really argue with that. I do think that it's fun in a lot of ways, and it has a lot of sort of interesting mechanics that make it fun to play. So
yeah, and I would just say that this game is probably the only one that we're going to talk about that I think legitimately should be considered a Kuso game because of the kind of the controls and the mechanics and glitchiness of it. But I think it's a really good game, and I think it actually is like a good Kuso game. But I think the other games are maybe more just licensed games that could be good or bad. But like this is more Kuso, if that makes sense. Like
yeah, I think this is
there's a lot of
probably
jankiness in this game. Like whether or not it's good or not, there's a lot of glitchiness. There's a lot of like really weird momentum physics. There's a lot of strange art. The final boss. I wanted to bring these two things up. I guess we could do that in our review, but one, they definitely stole the Jawas in one stage. Did you notice that? There's definite Jawas walking around.
Oh, you're referring to
the
like the
Oasis
Egyptian stage.
Yeah. And then but the most terrifying final boss I've ever seen in my life is the final boss of this game. And I want to ask you if you think this clown is more terrifying or the clown from It, because I think it's pretty close.
This one is worse.
It's terrifying. It's so bad. The poor children that played this game.
I didn't even really give it any thought that the final battle in this game is clown versus clown.
Yeah.
That's strange.
Clown on clown action.
Well, I wouldn't use exactly those words, John.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I must have misrepresented what I was trying to say there.
So any other things before we wrap up Donald Land in a very horrendous fashion?
No, I mean, we could talk more about, do we want to do the ratings through everything all at once or do them for each game now?
We'll just wrap them up at the end.
Okay.
I love that you wrote in the notes, who is Hamburger Head?
Yeah, I don't know who that Hamburger Head guy was. I was like, who is this hamburger guy who is walking up to me saying stuff?
I need you guys to know that my notes literally say, who is Hamburger Head? And that's our episode. That's what we're working with here. Yeah. So the next game up is MC Kids or Mick Kids. I'm gonna say it both ways constantly.
That's a big debate. Let's say Mick Kids. I think we should agree to call it Mick Kids.
Do we have to settle on it? Because I'm much happier with MC Kids. There's
really because of the two periods.
Yeah, I find
the real debate.
I find that the two periods make a very, very solid case for themselves. If I mean, you know, you just let me know. The
MC Kids. Fine. Fine.
Okay. I'm just saying that the title literally
has a period. In 1992, and by Virgin Interactive, they've actually made a lot of. I think they made the Cool Spot games as well. So some other advertisement games, and so this story really upset me. I want to get into this before I get into anything. Like this, the whole plot and the whole process of this game frustrates me because. So first, Ronald, if there's any children listening, maybe they should mute for like 10 seconds because I'm not saying anything bad. I'm literally saying what the story is, but he's playing with his magic bag in the park and it gets stolen, right? So what does he do? He doesn't go do anything about it. He says, go find these cards and then I'll tell you where to go to get me my bag back. What the heck? He's like, I'll tell you where Birdie is. And then you have to go get all these cards. They go back to him and he's like, oh, here's Birdie. And then Birdie's like, well, let me tell you where Grimace is. I'm like, what is this?
I think the important point here is that there were a lot of poor lessons being taught to kids. You should not teach kids to go run off with the first clown they meet who's playing with his magic bag in the park.
Yeah, definitely not. But he wouldn't even tell us where Birdie was. It really made me angry. I'm like, not only do you want me to get your magic bag, and it literally specifically says he was showing off with it. So he was being a hothead, trying to be cool, and then he messed up, and then we're supposed to go get his bag. But not only that, we have to bribe him to get information to get him back his own bag. Really didn't paint him in a positive picture, in my opinion.
It's not a great situation we find ourselves in, to be certain.
Okay, I'm sorry. We can progress with the normal things, but that it just very much frustrated me. But this game is really interesting. It's not really a straightforward platformer like Donald Land. It's much more of a I guess exploratory platformer. You can go, scroll the screen back left and right and explore it to try and find these different cards are a big focus. In order to unlock the next world, you have to find a certain number of cards per world. And I mean, there's more than the number you need in the world. So like if you're not able to get all of them, that's okay.
Right.
But usually you need to get 5 or 6 or whatever, and there'll be like 10 available. And so mostly this is focused on platforming. There's not a lot of like combat in this game. It's a very platforming focused game. There's only one boss, and that's the final boss. And most of the enemies are more designed to be in your way for the platforming rather than like something you're combating against. So a lot of the game is kind of exploring and trying to find cards and then figure out how to get them, because a lot of them are a little bit more puzzly, would you say? Like a
Yeah.
lot of times, like you'll have to go. There's certain sections of the game or things where you can go upside down, and now you can play with the gravity
Yeah, there's a
reversed, and
lot
so
of really
that'll be to
cool
reach a card.
elements. Things like,
Yeah.
invisible squares where you can place a block in them to give you a
Yep.
platform. There's boats that you can ride across oceans, like you mentioned. Some of the corners of platforms will allow you to actually run it if you run at full speed at these little. They look like gears on the edges of
Yeah.
platforms, and it'll make you actually flip to the underside, which reverses gravity essentially.
Yeah.
There's these springs, which only if you're holding an item heavy enough to weigh you down will you be able to like push it down enough to bounce on it. There's a lot
Yeah.
of really interesting mechanics that they came up with, that they all combine together. And also, I want to point out that from a technical perspective on the NES, having free moving scrolling both left, right, up, and down all at the same time is actually a really impressive feat. I
Yeah.
would say in a
I
lot
never
of
thought of that.
ways, I would say in a lot of ways, Kids actually did it. MC Kids did it better than SMB3 did. Um, Now, that's not to say it's a better game, but I'm saying if you look at the scrolling engine,
Yeah.
there's a lot of artifacts at the edges of the screen in SMB3 that you don't see really with MC Kids. So,
Yeah, and I'll say this game is really interesting. I really like this game quite a bit. I always have. And actually, Chad and I played this in Speed Gaming League, like right when we were first starting to get to know each other. We had to race it. I think I raced it twice in Speed Gaming League. I think I had 2 different levels I had to learn for one, and 2 different levels for the other. So I kind of learned like half this game. It's a lot of fun, and casually playing it. I mean, there's cards that I'll see that I won't know how to get, right off the bat, as somebody who games all the time. So they're not like, I felt like the cards were a really rewarding system, because it's kind of like getting moons in Mario Odyssey or something. It is a little bit of a collectathon, but it's like the way the game sets up the puzzle to get it, or the platforming issue to get it, like you usually feel like a sense of success getting it.
it's kind of an
So I
interesting
really like it.
it's an interesting mechanic throughout the game because the game is set up in such a way that your first instinct is to just go left or right in each level,
Mhm.
and it quickly becomes obvious to you as you play it that there's no point just going left or right. There
Yeah.
just beating the level has no effect. It's not even, necessary for completing the game. You really only just need to collect
Yeah.
enough cards. In fact, many of the levels are set up to sort of exploit that sort of mental need to just find the end of the level. Some of the levels, the end is right at the beginning. You can see
Yeah.
it, but you actually have to just avoid it, go around it to actually find all the cards that you need. So
Yeah, there's cards that you like are placed specifically where, like, if you don't jump perfectly, you'll end up hitting the end tape and having to replay the level. Because if you don't beat the level, also you don't get to keep the card, so you can't even just go into the level and then die or whatever. You do have to go back. That's the only point of completing a level, though, is to complete those cards. If you get no cards in a level, then you've accomplished nothing. And I think you can skip ahead to whichever levels you want, I'm pretty sure, as well.
yeah, I'm not sure if you're
Um,
required to play the levels in order. I don't remember offhand whether or not you have to beat a level in order to move past it on the
Yeah,
little
I think
overworld
it
that they
might
give
be
you.
similar to like the way SMW does it, where like if it branches paths, you don't have to go to certain levels and stuff. But
So the
yeah,
two
it's
characters that
really
you play in
interesting.
this game are named Mick and Mac,
Hmm,
which
creative.
is an interesting note because the next game that we talk about will actually have those characters reappearing. But before we do, kind of interesting, this game does have a Game Boy version as well, right?
Yeah, with terrible sound, terrible sound. I put it on the YouTube video for like, because this is the kind of game I would love to like speed run, because no one's probably speed run it on Game Boy. It'd be cool to give it exposure. I couldn't listen to it for more than 15 seconds. It was really bad. So that's disappointing, because the NES game has really good sound and stuff. So
Yeah, so there's a version that was released in Europe, which was
yeah,
McDonald Land, which is basically just MC Kids, just sort of in a compressed format. I don't think the levels are exactly the same. I think each world only has like 3 levels instead of 6.
yeah,
So it's a much more
yeah.
simplistic
Not a
game.
direct port.
But in the US and Japan, we actually got this game. We got McDonald Land, but we got it it was just called Spot the Cool Adventure. And I prepared this pun in advance, so you'll excuse me. But it's
nice.
basically just a sprite swap. Do you get it, John?
Wow.
Because
That's
it's
a
a
really
seven.
good one,
Yeah,
actually. I'm
right.
really proud of you for that.
Yeah. So it's a 7-Up game. Anyway, I'm not going to explain the joke.
I like it. I like it.
But what's crazy about it is that there was like no effort put into, from what I could tell, there was no effort put into making the game any different in any appreciable
Yeah.
way.
Except for the sprite.
The stage tiles say 7-Up instead of M, and in the level, instead of being Mick or Mac, you are just a walking cool spot. So
Yeah. That's interesting. I one thing I appreciate about MC Kids is that you are interracial best friends that high five every time something good happens.
I think
That's
it's
just an
important to
uplifting story.
it's important to high five as often as possible. I've often said that.
I love the high five sequence. Like, even though you never play as the other character, like because I think you can play 2-player and I guess switch off playing levels.
That makes sense.
You always high five your best friends whenever you get a card. So
make sure you're high fiving as often as possible.
So we got 2 more games. One we'll just touch on briefly. It's called Global Gladiators. This was also developed in 1992 by Virgin Interactive, and this is kind of the spiritual successor to MC Kids, although developed the same year, which is interesting.
And it features the same characters. So the full title of the game is Mick and Mac Global. Mick and Mac are Global Gladiators, or something like that.
Okay.
And so this game was developed by a completely different team at Virgin. They had their own separate team, even though it was developed the same year, and they were intending to release on the NES and SNES as well for Global Gladiators, but some complications prevented the game from being released. And it's kind of interesting. Greg Tavares, who is one of the developers for MC Kids, he has like a blog where he has written quite a lot about his disappointment surrounding MC Kids.
Interesting.
So Global Gladiators actually had a fairly large team. They were working on this game sort of at the same time, roughly, that they were working on Disney's Aladdin and Cool Spot, because they built this one engine to use for all 3 games. And they had a whole team working on the game, and it got a whole lot of publicity and things like that. But Greg Tavares, in his blog, he's written a lot about how they only had a team of 3 people. And there were a lot of promises from McDonald's about how the game would be promoted. They promised that when MC Kids came out, that they were going to put copies of it in Happy Meals. They were going to promote it really heavily. And once the game came out,
NES free NES game in a Happy Meal.
Well, I mean, I think that they were going to sell it much like we were talking about Sneak King earlier. For an upgrade of like $5 or something like that. They were gonna promote it. And at the last minute, McDonald's sort of pulled the plug on it in that way. They said, we're not going to promote it. They were going to do something like, advertising spots on television. They were going to promote it in stores. They were going to sell actual cartridges of it. And they didn't do any of that. And so the sales actually suffered quite a lot in comparison to Global Gladiators, which I think you'd be hard pressed to not be able to recognize that it is an objectively worse game. McDonald's actually did a really great job of promoting Global Gladiators, an objectively worse game. And I think that was really frustrating for the developer.
I have a couple questions for you, actually.
Go for it.
Like, do you know how much MC Kids sold for when it came out then?
I don't know offhand.
Was it like a budget title, I guess, for the NES?
No, I didn't look it up. I would imagine that a lot of their partnership was probably through rentals.
That makes sense.
That was probably the way they pushed it the hardest.
Received?
I don't think that it sold very well. I think that was one of the big issues. I think it was criminally underrated. A lot of reviewers
I'm just wondering
at the time,
reviews at the time liked it or not.
Well, so reviews at the time compared it a lot to Super Mario Brothers 3, which is a very common comparison these days. A lot of people sort of recognize that the physics engine feels kind of similar. There's a lot of things that it has in common, but at the time they didn't view it as being similar at all. And I think that they make a good argument. I think they make a good argument that it has very little in common with SMB3. There's an overworld map where you can pick levels, but the game is really designed around this idea of hunting down these collectibles rather than just beating levels. You don't get
power-ups like in Mario. You don't fight bosses like in Mario. It's very different.
In Super Mario Brothers 3, you can pick up blocks and ride in boats, and there's just like a lot of interesting mechanics that they had that a lot of these other games didn't. Sure. And so I can understand their frustration.
It's funny to me to think that McDonald's would want to self-promote Global Gladiator so much because it's kind of a gross looking game. Like you're shooting Big Mac sauce all over the place, and like it doesn't make Big Mac sauce seem like an appealing thing to
So
me.
I think
Like
Global
it's like
Gladiators,
slime.
it was sort of marketed as this big environmentalist push.
Okay.
So the idea of the game is sort of you are cleaning up whatever this world is. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I played it for about 15 minutes before I had to stop just out of frustration and anger. So
Nice.
if there's a deeper story here, if there's more to this rabbit hole, I'll never know it.
Yeah, so that's just a game we wanted to point out. Basically, it's an annoying type of platform. I guess you have to find a certain number of an item before you can leave the stage. So one of those kind of
Yeah, there's like
2D
these
collectathons,
yeah,
which
there's like
kind of
these
MC Kids is, but it does it in a creative way.
Yeah, in each level, there's like these tiny little M collectibles, which at first you would think that they're just like for score, or you find 100 of them and you get a life like any other game. And you get to the end of the first level and it says, sorry, you don't have enough to finish the stage. And it stops you from leaving. And then I went back and I kept finding more and more. I'm going to tell you my story of me playing this game, okay?
Okay.
Let me
I
set the
feel like you
stage for
need
you.
to vent. I think
I do.
you
I
look like you
do.
need an outlet right now. So go ahead,
So
buddy.
so I played the first level and I kept collecting more and more. And what you need to understand about the way the
It's
first
never
level is
enough,
set
is
up,
it?
it wasn't enough. And here's the
Mm.
problem though, is that the only way to access where the end of the level is you have to walk along this bridge that breaks out from under you. And so I would like jump across the bridge so I wouldn't break all the tiles. And I got there and it wasn't enough. So I went back and found more. And then I went back across the bridge again, continuing to break tiles. It wasn't enough. I went back over and over again until it didn't matter how many I was going to find because there were no tiles left for me to jump across. I was no longer able to beat the level, even if I had found enough of the. I hated the game. I hated everything about it.
I just want you to know that you've collected enough for me.
Thank you. That does make
It's
me feel
okay,
better.
buddy. I'm glad. It definitely seems to have been a traumatizing experience for our boy Chad. This was built on the same engine that Virgin used also to create Disney's Aladdin on Genesis, which is a good game that we did talk about at one point.
Yep.
And Cool Spot, which I don't know, maybe there's like 9 versions of Cool Spot, and it's all the most boring game ever. I liked it as a kid. Maybe we'll talk about it one day, but it's kind of hard to talk about. Moving on to a more interesting game, and the last of our games we're going to talk about, McDonald's Treasureland Adventure, developed by Treasure. You've probably heard of them as being a really good developer because they are. And this was published by Sega in 1993. What other games has Treasure made?
Oh
Big,
crap.
big,
I know that
big
they
one.
made what why did I just suddenly forget the name of the game with
I
the
don't
cool
know.
kid
So
with the
did I.
strut on the NES?
Oh, Treasure Master.
Treasure Master. Didn't they make
Yeah.
Treasure Master? Oh no, maybe
So
they didn't.
I think they made you. Well, go ahead and talk about the game. I'll figure out who made
Okay, so it was developed by
what
Treasure
they
and
made.
published by Sega in 1993. That was the last of the 4 games. If you haven't paid attention, if you haven't noticed, these are actually in chronological order based on their release. In the game, there are 3 different difficulties, and what these difficulties actually do is they affect enemy health and sort of how items in the game works. And the premise of the game is that it follows the adventures of Ronald McDonald and his friends, the Hamburglar Grimace and Birdie the Early Bird, in an attempt to find 4 pieces of a treasure map and ultimately finding the treasure to which it leads.
Yeah, so they made Gunstar Heroes and Mischief Makers. Those are the 2 big ones.
Okay.
Also, they made Wario World. They made Ikagura, um, Ikaruga. Sorry,
Ikaruga.
Ikaruga. So some Astro Boy games, but they've usually made some pretty solid games. I think they made the GBA Astro Boy games, which are actually kind of popular speedruns and really cool. So this game's really well made.
Oh yeah.
I guess we can get about that in the ratings, but this is definitely like a step up into the 16-bit era. I think a lot of times bad SNES games can be more like NES games, and this still has that like feel of like an Aladdin or Mystical Quest or something.
Yeah,
So
this
that's
is a
cool.
really well polished game. It's
Yeah,
actually fun to play. There's a lot of auto scrollers that feel like it
a
slow it down
lot
when
of
you're
auto
playing it
scrollers.
casually. But in general, it's a really polished game. It's one where if you're playing, I haven't played it on the hardest difficulty, but if you're playing it on the default difficulty mode when you boot the game up, it's actually pretty easy to beat.
Hmm.
It was a fun 45 minutes for me. It only took me 45 minutes to beat it because The game doesn't punish you too hard for mistakes, and you collect enough gold to be able to buy, lives and health constantly. So it's not a terribly difficult game, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend it to someone if you're looking for something to play casually. But overall, it's a nicely polished game. It's a pretty straightforward platformer. It's not all directly just left or right. There's a lot of sort of navigating mazes and paths and surviving auto scrollers. There's some pretty creative boss fights. All of the boss fights sort of have the same format where so your health is represented by these magic gems in the game, but these magic gems also have other uses. You pay your friends sometimes to give you either tips or to help you out. You can also, when you're fighting the bosses, none of the bosses can actually take damage until they have sort of done this inhale motion and absorb one of your magic gems. And it's only while they're sort of eating the magic gem, which is one of your hit points, that they can take damage. And so you have
that was
to...
frustrating for me. The first boss I died to, I couldn't figure out. I was like, I cannot get any damage on this guy. And I was like, it seems like when the enemy's spewing something out of its face, you usually don't want to stand in it. And I was like, oh, I'll stand in it, and then it takes one of your things. And
Well,
so,
right before
kind of a strange
the
mechanic.
first boss, you run in, or you can run into, if you go the right way, you can run into the Hamburglar, who for 2 magic gems will tell you the secret. He says that none of the bosses can be damaged unless they're eating a magic gem.
Oh, I didn't talk to the Hamburglar. He was.
You gotta
sneaky
talk
on
to the
me,
Hamburglar.
So that makes. I didn't like that Birdie the early bird, who, by the way, I didn't know was created because of McDonald's breakfast. That's kind of cool.
Yep.
Gets kidnapped, like, and not all 3 games, but at least 2 of the games. But I had to give her gems to get her out of jail. It was kind of weird.
You
was
have
I
to
posting
pay
her bail.
You have to pay bail.
Yeah, and then like she saves my life, and she's like, "Try and be safer next time." I'm like, "I just got you out of jail, girl."
Yeah, that was her fault.
Yeah.
Plus those gems are your health. So not only did she take your health, but then she's smug about it.
She's literally turning us into a Horcrux.
I'm not sure
on Harry Potter.
I'm not sure you know what that word means, and that's okay.
Yeah. So why don't you talk about the University of Bath Institute for Policy Research and School of Management and their research on advert games?
Wow, that's a hell of a segue. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I left myself a note here to mention, sort of on the topic of advert games, that they did a research study into them in the United Kingdom and used the findings to call for urgent government action to protect children from the subconscious effects of advert gaming. And so their research basically concluded that children as old as 15 were not able to recognize that advert games were adverts and that their food choices were influenced without their conscious awareness. So it's kind of interesting that, even these fun and lighthearted games do have a significant impact on children, and that the worst part is that for however smart you thought you were at that age, research shows that a lot of children don't even realize that their habits are being affected by games like this. So
here's what I'm asking though: who under 15 is deciding what they eat at any point in their life, anyways? Actually, I feel like your parents decide everything you eat before. It's not like they're going out and get grocery shopping or going through the drive-through. Like, give me a break.
That's a super compelling point, though. it's like the kid says, I played MC Kids. Mom, I want McDonald's, and isn't it mom's job to say no?
Yeah, similar to buying cars, you could get all the kids hooked on monster trucks, but if they say, "Mom, can you buy me a monster truck?" that's the only way they're gonna get a monster truck. They're not gonna. So. Anyways, that's just my little 2 cents.
Well, they're idiots then. Hey, let's take a quick break and listen to some music of some sort, and then we'll talk a little bit about these games.
Woo! So generally on a week, we'll go ahead and break down a game by graphics, music and sound, controls and gameplay, difficulty and fairness, fun and replayability, and give it a rating from 0 to 10. But since we're doing 4 different games, it's kind of really tough to go through each of those games in depth about that. But I guess we can just kind of do an overhead view of these games in that way and kind of talk about the things we like and dislike in each game. And then I think it would be fun if we did our power rankings to decide what are the best McDonald's games. If I only have the money to buy one McDonald's game today, what should I buy? You
Ooh.
know? Yeah, that's a tough life decision. So, starting with the graphics, what do you think of the graphics for all 3 of these games? I think we're just going to leave Global Gladiators out of this.
I hope everyone leaves Global Gladiators out of everything.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I mean, obviously it's hard to compare. Donald Land is early Famicom,
Hmm.
MC Kids is late NES, and McDonald's Treasureland Adventure is Genesis. So as far as like general polish and quality of graphics goes, it's going to go in chronological order in
Yeah.
reverse. But I think that sort of just basing on what they were working with, I do really like the style of old Famicom platformers, and so I do like
Hmm.
Donald Land. But I still think it's probably the worst of the 3. I think
Yeah.
just with what they were working with, I do think MC Kids did the best. That being said, McDonald's Treasureland Adventure is a gorgeous game, and it's almost hard to not just like say, yeah, it's the best. Sure, why not?
Yeah, I would say the graphics for the Famicom game are a bit janky. I like them. They're endearing, but they're not good. They're not like
No.
objectively not great. But they're pretty typical of their time. The clown at the end is terrifying. I still have to point that out. They do have a lot of chibi characters that are kind of cute. Like I kind of like the art style they went with for it. Not taking itself too seriously. MC Kids is a bit bland in terms of like at least the environments and stuff. Like you can tell which levels are which, but like the sprites are not very interesting. But yeah, McDonald's Treasureland Adventure is a really beautiful game. I was like shocked. Like it's really well animated. Ronald is
Super
like
polished.
a full like you know exactly what they're going for with that's Ronald McDonald. This is this character. Like it reminds me a lot of Aladdin, to be honest. It really does remind me a lot of Aladdin. Like they put that much work into it. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it pretty much runs
If
away with the discussion on graphics.
yeah, if you talk about consider the screen scrolling as part of the graphics in terms of being able to scroll in all directions, MC Kids being able to kind of navigate that whole world is really impressive for an NAS game, like you
Yeah, it's
said.
definitely the most technically impressive of the 3, I would say. MC
I think
Kids.
what's surprising is that all 3 of these games shine pretty well in terms of music and sound. Like I like the music in all 3 of these games. McDonald's Treasureland Adventure has really good like rockin' jazzy music. It's really impressively good. MC Kids has really catchy music that has that like Comerica warble I've talked about in the
Oh, I
past
know
that I
exactly what
really
you're talking.
like.
Like that
Like
really
anytime
nice
I hear
square
that
wave. Yeah.
like it's like bad. I think it's a bad sound effect, to be clear. Like objectively, I think it's bad, but I love anytime I hear it in any game. And so like it instantly makes me like music more when I hear the big nose warble. And so I really like the McKids music. There's also like different music in a lot of different levels in McKids, which is nice. MC Kids. Like there's not just one track or 2 tracks. There's like 4 or 5 tracks that it switches between. So
Yeah.
MC Kid's really cool. I have some interesting things I want to point out about the sound effects though. Donald Land uses like the exact Karnov sound effect when you like kill a boss. That like high piercing like screeching noise, which like is oddly really satisfying to me. Like when you beat a boss in Karnov, you know when it makes that noise.
Yeah.
Like
That's the
like
same
the
sound
boss
it makes in Donald Land?
yeah, the bosses make that noise for like a really short period of time when your bomb's exploding and doing damage. It's really
Oh man,
interesting.
I don't even remember that. I mean, they were both Data East, right?
Yeah, that's Data East. Yeah, they are both Data East, so that's probably why.
Yeah.
Like, so that like stood out a lot to me. And then McDonald's Treasureland Adventure definitely has a lot of sound effects from like Streets of Rage, which is pretty cool.
Okay.
Like a lot of the screaming ones. I thought I heard the Sonic sound effect when he died. Like it seemed like the same one. Like if you fall off a platform and die, it makes kind of a Sonic sound effect. But there was a bunch of different like shared properties between this and Streets of Rage, which is one of the best games on the Genesis. So that's cool. But I kind of enjoyed all the sound effects for everything. I guess there's not that many sound effects for MC Kids,
No,
but like I
not a
said,
whole lot.
multiple good tracks in that game, so it's not like one of those. I think Donald Land has basically one song for this all the levels,
I
or
don't
does it
remember
change as
offhand.
well?
It definitely changes, but I can't think of whether or not there's like a different song for each stage, or whether or not it's just a small number it cycles through.
Yeah, I don't know. I like that is catchy music as well. But I mean, McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure really good. What about controls and gameplay?
So Donald Land definitely suffers, I think, the most in controls.
Yeah.
It's pretty challenging to control, and it takes a little bit to figure out. First off, how to really make the distance and the jumps that you're supposed to. There's sort of an unspoken mechanic about your ability to jump off your own apple bombs in the game. So Donald McDonald throws these bombs that are shaped like apples because healthy food is terrible for you
Yeah, you want to
and
get rid
will
of the
kill
healthy
you.
food. Yeah.
And so he throws these apple bombs that follow this parabola, but it's based sort of on how fast you're moving. So if you're jumping, it goes higher, or if you're moving to the right, it swings further to the right. And it can be fairly tough to aim them and control them. But then in addition to that, you have to hit them really precisely onto an enemy if you want it to stick. And then also, while it's in the air or if it's on the ground, you can actually jump on them. So for instance, you can throw it into the air and jump off of it to get to a higher
Hmm.
platform. You also get this weird speed boost when you jump off of them, so you can use that to your advantage, as well as jumping off of moving enemies. So,
Yeah.
so I think all around the controls are just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, you get these random momentum boosts. It makes the speed run very interesting, but casually playing it, it's really easy to like have an enemy throw an arrow at you and you touch that arrow, and instead of the arrow damaging you, it like projects you forward really quickly, and then you fall off because you're, platforming, and you fall off the level. Like I had that happen so many times, or like certain logs, like you'll have to like almost clip into them to get up to the platform. So it has this really janky control. The momentum is like really hard to control at times, and so it makes the platforming really difficult for sure. I'd say MC Kids is also a very slippery game. I think the physics are consistent enough that once you get used to them, it makes it a very good game.
Right.
But they are not naturally like quality control physics. They're not Mario, or they're not like modern Mario or Super Mario World or something. Like they're
I've
definitely
often
very
thought about
slippery.
I've often thought about MC Kids as being the game style of SMB3, but with the physics engine of SMB2, because it's got that real
Yeah, it does have
slipperiness.
it has. I think it's even more so than SMB2, but yeah, they're
It's got
both
the sort of
very
floaty
similar. Yeah.
slipperiness.
Um, McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure controls really tightly, to be honest, for the most part. I mean, you can't like jump especially high and far because you're very round, I guess. I don't
Right.
know. But it controls pretty well. Um, Moving on to, and I guess the gameplay is actually the other big point, because I think this will reflect the most in my rankings. I think at least Donald Land and MC Kids are like very interesting games gameplay wise. Like there was something that made me want to keep playing. Like McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure, I was ready to be done with pretty quickly. Like it's a objectively really polished, good looking game, and it's probably perfect for the people it was intended for, which is little kids. Like it's very easy. Like you have to take a lot of hits to die. There's lots of health. Like it's like even if you fall off the level, balloons will take you up to the top if you have them. Like you're constantly like picking up health and other items without even realizing it. It just got boring to me like pretty quickly. There's a lot of auto scrollers. So I think the gameplay in the other games, even though their physics and controls are considerably worse, make them a lot more engaging of
Yeah, I think we'll talk about
experiences.
this a little more. I think McDonald's Treasureland Adventure is sort of in an interesting space because I think it's an objectively good speed run. But there's a lot
Mhm.
of auto scrollers in it. It doesn't have a lot of sort of compelling gameplay in the way that SMB3, or sorry, in the way that MC Kids and Donald Land. That was completely
See, now you
unintentional.
think it's SMB3. You
I
don't even
know.
know.
I feel bad for him. I feel so bad for them. But I think it doesn't have compelling gameplay in the same way. Like it's an objectively good game, but one that I don't think that I would pick up and plan to play very often.
Sure.
And I think that almost hurts it a little bit because while I know about the speed run from having watched it and looked at tutorials and investigating into it, I think that part of it not being sort of compelling gameplay to play makes it also not necessarily compelling gameplay to watch all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that if I was a kid, McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure would be the game I would enjoy the most, which
Yeah,
objectively means it met its goal, right, as
right.
being the best of the three. But like now, right now in 2018, as a 32-year-old playing all three, like it's pretty boring to me.
Yeah.
I thought it was a cool, really well made game that was kind of boring, whereas the others were interesting. In terms of difficulty and fairness, I mean, I think the gameplay for McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure is a bit boring, and as I said, and so like that's partly because it's really easy, but also partly because it's a lot heavy on auto scrollers,
I think
and
the
it's like a
default
lot of
difficulty for McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure is beginner, which I
yeah,
wonder
that's
whether or
the
not
yeah
I wonder if I'd enjoy it more if I played it again on expert.
possibly.
I wanna check it out. Go ahead,
Yeah,
sorry.
it's just unfortunate that there's so many auto scrollers too. That always is something that just kind of makes a game boring to me. But at least they're interesting casually. Generally, you can die in auto scrollers. You know, you don't know what's coming up next. At least, in terms of fun and replayability, like the only game that I think they're all fun. But the only game that really has any replay value per se is MC Kids, because there's a lot of different cards that you can go and get. So like you can try and 100% it and unlock all the cards.
Right.
But outside of that, most of them are basically kind of you get what you get, which is fine. I think that's as much as you can expect from a game like this. But that's what I think is really impressive about MC Kids is it has that kind of depth while also being an advert game, which is pretty cool.
Right. Yeah,
Any
go ahead.
thoughts on that? I guess on like I assume you probably are in agreement with me there, but
Yeah, I think that MC Kids is the one that these days I would want to pick up and play again. It's so hard to talk about them comparatively because I think that there's a difference between sort of their target audience, what I would want to play today, and
absolutely.
speedrun wise. Like I think those are all three completely different situations.
Yeah, actually, I think the games rank kind of as those being their three different strengths.
Right.
But I would say that you know, MC Kids had me where I would see a card and like be like, oh, I wonder how I get that. Like even now in 2018,
Right.
and like even though I'm like I'm gonna just play a certain amount of it, you know, to make sure I remember everything for the podcast. Like there was part of it where I would see one, and I'd be like, well, I can move on to the next level and start seeing other stuff, and I'd be like, but I wonder how I get that card, and that's really cool. I mean, I think that makes the game really interesting. That kind of compelled me much more than anything in the
And you
other two
actually have that
games.
happen to you a lot in the game. There will be times where you'll see a card and realize that you're on completely the wrong path to get to it. And it really
Yeah,
does sort of compel you to say, screw it, I'm just going to start the level over. Or we're
yeah.
going to go
Or
back and figure
you'll
it
see
out.
it. You'll
Or,
see that you're like, well, I've got to be upside down to get this card, but like I don't know how to get upside down anywhere near here. So like, where do like it makes you start problem solving and troubleshooting,
right.
like kind of how to do stuff. And I think that's really cool. It makes for more compelling gameplay to me. But so do you want to do power rankings?
Yeah.
I've got mine set. So
So these power rankings, I'm assuming we're talking about what game would I want to play right now these days?
I get whatever power ranking you want to give. That's what I'm thinking
Well, I
is
have a
favorite
different
game.
power
What do you
ranking
like
for
the
all
most?
three ways of looking at it.
Okay,
So for me right now, if I were to want to pick up and play a game right this second, we're not talking about speedrunning, we're talking about just most fun
sure.
games.
Yeah.
For me, it would be MC Kids number 1,
Yep.
McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure 2, Donald
Okay.
Land 3.
Okay. For me, it would be MC Kids 1, which I think is objectively like a 7. I keep saying objectively. It's not really objectively. Subjectively, in my opinion, it's like a 7 out of 10 game. Like it's
I
a
think
really
that's
solid game.
I think
Like
that's a strong, yeah,
which is
absolutely. It's up there.
impressive for that. Donald Land would be my second because like it at least was interesting enough for me to be like, I want to beat this. It had that Kuso aspect that drew me into it enough where I'm like, it's not good, but also like something made me want to finish. The only thing that really frustrated me with that is there's no real checkpoints in the levels, and some of them are fairly long, and so that kind of made me not want to come back to it as much. But if it
Right.
had checkpoints, I would have been much more inclined to really want to finish it. McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure, I think, is objectively the best of the three. Now I'm actually saying objectively properly. Objectively the best of the three in terms of graphics, music, game design, everything that you could think about a game, except that it's just not interesting. It's just too boring for me, and that's the worst thing you can be in as a video game, right? You've
Yeah.
said that before as well.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
being boring is the worst thing you can do. And so like at least there's that something that made Donald Land better for me where I
I
wanted to
get it.
keep playing.
I get it.
So yeah.
I think
I think
they're
if I
all
were to learn a
things.
speed game, Donald Land is a very interesting speed game. So I think we should take a quick break, dive into some of these speed runs because some of them have some really interesting tricks and strategies in them.
So to start off with, we're going to talk just a little bit about McDonald's Treasureland Adventure. Now keep in mind, we're doing all of these at a surface level. That's part of the deal for doing a lot of games in one episode. But we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with each of these games. And the intent, as always, is sort of give you an idea, if you wanted to watch the game, what's interesting about it and what do you need to know going into it. So first off, McDonald's Treasureland Adventure is where we're going to start. And just talking a little bit about the records, there's a beginner mode, a normal mode, and an expert mode. And it has speedruns both on NTSC and PAL, though PAL really hasn't been run a whole lot, so I'm excluding it from discussion.
I think there's one run or something.
Yeah, I think there's like 4 runs just on beginner mode.
Oh, and then none on the others, yeah.
Yeah, so beginner mode, the world record is by Boone, who has a 2010. And I should say before I really dive into this too much, this is probably of the 3 the most optimized speedrun. A lot of work has been done to make this run really, really polished and optimized. Time has been taken off by taking a lot of ideas directly from the tasks, which is where I really love to see games go. And so while before we were talking a little bit about how this game has a lot of auto-scrollers, and it has a lot of things that make it maybe not the most fun to play these days, I will say that I think this is objectively the best speed game in terms of where their community has taken it.
We're going to need to start a drinking game where anytime we say objectively, the listeners have to take a shot. I think that's going to be the next thing we have to do.
I think it's probably better if we take the shot so that we stop saying the word objectively.
It's an objectively great idea.
It is a good one.
Two, you can just tell, like, watching Boone's run, like, it's one of those games where each split is like plus 0.2 seconds, plus 0.2 seconds.
Right.
Like this game is really down to like within a second of, what you're trying to gun
I think his
for,
note on the leaderboard,
cool
for his 20-minute and 10-second run says, I think I can get 20 minutes and 9 seconds, but I'm going to wait for a new discovery. So so this is interesting that all 3 categories actually have a different world record holder. I kind of like to see that. It's cool to get a clean sweep yourself, but it's also cool when the community sort of takes on each of the categories separately.
Yeah.
So the normal mode world record is by Death Johnson in 22:35, and the expert mode world record is by WoW Constrictor in 25:46. And I wanted to mention that the TAS of this game is on expert mode as well. It's by Node 1729 and Sonicustar. Sonicustar is actually a really well-known TASer who tasked a game... Oh, Pugsy. Sonicustar did Pugsy as well. And the expert task is actually in 22:52, so not very far off from the actual expert mode world record. So that's kind of interesting. Just some key points. There's not a lot of punishment for taking damage in this run, especially if you're playing on beginner. There's a lot of health sort of floating around that you can
Yeah,
make
I was
use of.
picking it up on accident. I was trying to die at one point to hear if it was the sonic sound effect, and it like took me like a minute to die, like to try and find things that hurt me, and then like I was taking damage and then accidentally picking up more damage. Like it was just everywhere.
I mean, to that same point,
Yeah, just getting health everywhere.
halfway through the game, I finally asked someone which of the things
Yep,
on my
that's where I
HUD
was too. There's
was I
jewels, there's flowers, there's all these things in the bottom, and I'm like, I don't even know which one's health. I don't know how
I
close I
had
am
to
to being dead
I
or
had
not.
to ask because I hadn't died and I couldn't figure out which of them were going down because I was taking damage infrequently and refilling it so quickly. I never saw
Yeah,
it go.
I had the
Anyway,
same thing.
so one of the interesting strats in this game, one of the things I found the most interesting is there's this mechanic in the game that when you're running around and you see hooks hanging from ceilings, for instance, you can hook onto them by throwing your scarf upward and it'll latch on and you can use that to pull yourself up and eventually jump to higher platforms. One of the interesting things about that is if you take damage, there's a knockback associated with it. But a lot of the levels are really polished in terms of global cycles. So almost every single room is based on some sort of global cycle if you want to make it through the whole room effectively. And one of the ways that they maximize the distance that they can cover in short periods of time through damage boosting is if you throw your scarf, you can actually negate knockback. So rather than getting knocked back in any direction, if you throw your scarf at exactly the right time, you don't knock back in either direction. So
Yeah, there's also some strats that are kind of typical to a lot of speed runs, like the tomato boss strat. I think this is a similar strategy in some of the other boss fights, kind of taking damage and then getting inside the hitbox in order to be able to kind of spam the attack, stuff like that. One interesting mechanic of the game that I kind of alluded to earlier was that you pick up these balloons or you can buy them. There's these shops that you can buy items in, which again are confusing when you don't know what any of the items are. You're like, I can spend gold on a flower, on a jewel, on like there's so many different items and I don't know what any of them do. But essentially when you fall off the stage, the balloons will pull you back up to the top. Basically allowing you to not die from falling off a platforming stage, but that's exploited at least in one stage to kind of skip ahead faster and further than you normally could if you were just doing the standard platforming. But that's similar to like this game on NES Gremlins 2, which has a very similar mechanic that's exploited quite a bit.
I actually used that mechanic quite a few times casually. I found myself in a long room with a pit and I accidentally fell in the pit and I said, screw it, we're just going to power through it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I have 3 balloons and I'm going to make it to the end of this room.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that you can take advantage of. I didn't know how I was picking up balloons again or when I had them. So like there were a couple times when I would have wanted them, I realized, oh wait, I don't have unlimited balloons. Like I must have used them all. But yeah, it's one of those sung heroes of like a speed run that, you know, people put a lot of time into some runs that are not, no offense to Boot in chat, the most interesting to watch, like me and Alien Syndrome. But sometimes you're just passionate about a game and you
Me
say,
and every
I
game
don't
I've
care how
played.
boring it is to watch or boring it is to run. I love it. I want to run it. It's fun for me. And so it's a cool speed game though. It's got a lot of interesting optimizations, like you said.
Yeah,
Very,
I
very
think this is
taking
one of those
development.
games that it would be easy to watch and just sort of sleep on it, but if you can really appreciate the subtle mechanics that make the game faster, I think it's really worth checking out, especially if you're really into highly optimized speed games yourself. It might be worth learning. So
Yeah. The next game, Donald Land, is definitely a bit more flashy, I guess. There's a lot more, I guess, difference between the casual playthrough and the speedrun in terms of a lot of the tech used. And I think that makes it interesting. There's only any percent run. There's really nothing else you can do in the game. But Sunker has a 1248 that he got this year, actually. So somebody's come back to this game. And then Garrison had previously had it at 1259. So the biggest thing with this, so there's not a lot of damage boosting in this game outside of the swimming stages, because you do lose time every time you get hit. You can't move forward and for like a whole second. So there's not a lot of damage boosting, but there is a lot of boosting with the bombs that you have, both by throwing them right below you and then blowing up, giving you additional momentum. They don't hurt you. And then also throwing them in the air and jumping off them, as Chad alluded to earlier. And then you can get something called they were calling it a double apple, but basically the ability to throw two apples and have them on the screen at the same time. And so when you get that, you are able to combine these two different types of tech, blowing up an apple below you to shoot you forward, and timing throwing an apple at the same time, which then you would eventually jump off of and gain momentum off of again. And so you'll notice that this game jerks forward quite a bit, and the precision in which you have to leave, these bombs in different places and know exactly where to leave them and how far they'll boost you is really impressive, honestly, because like I said, this game's really hard to control casually, and it's really easy when you get that momentum. It's really kind of out of control. It's really easy to fall off the stage or bump into something, and so controlling that's impressive. So
Now,
much so that it scrolls the screen so fast that it won't even load, right? I mean,
yeah.
so you've got to know exactly what's coming up.
Well, it's not just that, but actually it has the effect of sometimes like completely canceling out some of the geometry. So if you're moving so fast the game can't load the next screen, you actually are getting a lot of the collision and geometry from the previous screen, and you can use that to skip things from time to time. If you watch the current world record, for instance, he has a hard time fighting. Well, not a hard time. He planned for it, but if you're playing casually, it would be a hard time fighting the first boss because he actually has ended up scrolling the screen such that there's a wall in his way. He can't even get to where the first boss is. But it does have the side effect of sometimes in later stages where there might be like a stack of boxes in your way. If you're scrolling the screen fast enough,
Despawns them,
yeah, the boxes aren't even going to be there. And it's not like what you think of when you think of despawning something. It's not like moving so fast that the game doesn't spawn something. I mean, the game is laid out in this like grid tile fashion. You're moving so fast that the game is actually like copying parts of the level that are behind you to put in front of you because it can't load what's actually supposed to be in front of you fast enough. That's how fast you're moving.
You can tell that it's designed that way because there's a certain boss at the end of the Dark Forest where you shoot through the right side of the screen and it lands on the left side of the screen to hit him. At least that's I think he was having a bit of a tough fight, so I don't know if that's always a strat used, but it's definitely something available to you. Or if you're shooting to the right, all the way to the right of the screen, it'll come back left. And so the screen's basically loading in that way, and it creates a really, I mean, you really got to know what's going on and what's ahead of you, I assume, because if you don't have a real understanding of this game, I don't know how you would possibly be able to keep moving forward with this. You can't visually see what's going on.
So jumping off of your own apple does give you a speed boost. If you're playing casually, it's not possible to like throw an apple and jump off of it immediately. If you're playing it casually and you want to like get an extra jump, you would throw the apple, and as it's coming back down, you would time your jump so you can land on it on its way back down. But as it so happens, if you can throw two apples at one time, if you get the power up that allows you to do that, then you can throw an apple on the ground, and the speed boost that you get off of that apple that's on the ground actually gives you enough speed to be able to catch up to one that you're throwing as you throw it. So you throw it into the air and you're moving fast enough that you actually land on it as you're going up with it, and you jump off of it again. And that is where you start to get enough speed to really start to break the loading of the level, which is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, you're probably moving way too far on the x-axis than you're supposed to, and so like it can't process where your x position is. It's really cool. There's also a really interesting trick later in the game where essentially you end up jumping on, doing this trick of blowing up an apple and then jumping on another one, and you end up landing on this skeleton head that'll ride you across the level. And I don't think that's intended in the game at all, so that's pretty cool as well. There's a bunch of little tricks like that, but it's a really fun game to watch visually as a speed run because it's just got a lot of this tech and just the precision of knowing where to place and throw the bombs for either hitting enemies, hitting bosses, or projecting yourself forward. It's like constantly, it's not like a lot of holding right. There's a lot of any single time that you can blow up an apple below you or land on an enemy or land on an apple to get that momentum boost, you're going to go for it. So it's really cool in that way.
Definitely.
So hopefully we'll see Chad running that soon, maybe.
Yeah, I do want to.
It's on the list, right?
It's on my short list. I have a short list of just a few games.
Is the short list 500 games?
No, I made a short list quite recently that's like 6 games I want to learn soon.
Wow. It's on the short list.
It's on the short list. So
is Alien Syndrome on the short list?
Never. It's not on the long list either.
That's too bad. What about the middle list?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Maybe we'll do 2-player. Maybe.
So MC Kids is one of the games that me and Oth raced each other when we were when we were so much younger, so much
So
more
so
naive.
Speed Gaming League only has you play usually just a few levels. I also did
Yeah.
a blind race of this game much later, I think with Darbian and some other people, but I can't remember who else was in the race. I think it might have been X Dragon. I did a blind race with some people of the whole game, so I have played this whole game. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of challenging to play the whole game, though. Finding the cards in the last world is annoying.
Yeah, it's like a real puzzle, which is cool. And so there actually are two categories of this game. There's any percent, which is the world record is 1936, only 18 days ago by Shah. That's SCHAAA. Prince Leaf previously had it at a 1945, and then RC Ray is a 1948. There's also 100%. So 100% entails getting all of the cards and completing all the levels. So even though you don't necessarily need to complete all the levels, that's part of the 100% route. And so this actually recently had action as well. RC Ray got the world record a month ago at a 28:44, and then Shah has one for the previous time of 29:51. So this game's seeing a lot of improvement recently, which is kind of cool. I know some people were into it a long time ago. I haven't really seen it spring up in the speedrun community too often, but it's cool to see it kind of get some attention. And do you kind of want to talk about? I feel like this would have been a really interesting game if this hadn't been routed for you to route, right?
Yeah,
Figure
I
out
think
which cards you want to get and which ones are most optimal. And
I think one of the things that makes this game really shine is sort of how open it is to routing. You know, it's not just about beating the levels as fast as possible, which very often comes down to hold right and don't get hung up on anything. But this game really lends itself well to exploration and really needing to properly time out what's the most effective cards to pick up and find and things like that. So I think that's really nice. The gameplay itself is challenging. It's challenging to play. You know, even if this were just a straight left to right platformer, but actually hunting down the cards just makes it way tougher.
yeah, I would also say this game does have some of that interesting aspect that Donald Land has, where the momentum is so slippery that you can gain enough momentum to make certain jumps that you're probably not intended to make casually. And so that is implemented throughout the run to grab certain cards and such like that. So it does have some interesting tech to it. I feel like there's some cards that you grab from the side, which isn't something you'd really think to do casually playing it, and the game intends for you to kind of take this route maybe on some platforms above you or kind of wrap around the level, and instead you might be able to jump from underneath it and barely get it.
Yeah,
So there
there's
was a
quite
bunch
a
of
few of
cards
them that are
that I
obtained
couldn't
in.
get.
Yeah, there's
Yeah, like
quite
I
a few that
tried to
are
do the things
unintended
they were
ways.
doing. Yeah, like there was one in particular in the beginning of one of the cloud stages where there's some blocks that you can run and jump off of, and it looks like maybe you could run and jump and grab it, but I couldn't do it. I tried it like 20 times. And then
Oh, I
there's a
got that
cloud.
one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Well, maybe I didn't try 20 times, but then there's a cloud that takes you and wraps you around, and that's the intended way. So it's like there's definitely some skill involved, and it's not just routing to get the cards, but there's definitely some mastering of those momentum physics for sure.
right. Yeah,
Um,
it's pretty challenging. I mean, just maintaining full speed, even if we're not talking
yeah,
about the routing, but just naturally the way
absolutely.
the movement works. You know, just maintaining speed can be tough. The controls are slippery. Avoiding running into enemies, which is going to slow you down. Walls, blocks. You know, finding ways to navigate obstacles and negotiate
Luckily,
them.
there's only a little bit of knockback, so that is nice. But there are these things in levels that literally shoot you back to the beginning. They're so terrible. And I know there's some tight parts in the speed run where like you have to be around those. I'm sure for somebody who's like pretty gifted at this game, it's not an issue. But if you're casually playing this, I mean, I remember in Speed Gaming League it being an issue where like if you hit one of these things, it shoots you. You're losing like 15 seconds then
I
because
remember specifically in Speed Gaming League, so one of the levels that we were playing, you could actually get to the end of it from the very beginning just by squeezing past those blocks. And we
yep,
were
yep,
told that for Speed Gaming League, we weren't allowed to use that skip because they tried to sort of keep us in a similar route so that it's actually easy to compare us directly. And I was given flashbacks to that watching Shaw's run because in one of the very last levels, he avoids having to like navigate way out of the
yep,
way by just like running and sliding underneath one of those blocks.
yeah.
And the timing has to be super precise.
Yeah, they're pretty powerful. I mean, like you're near them and they shoot you way back to the beginning, like real quickly. Like they're no joke. It's not like there's there's no way to recover from it, essentially. Like, it's not like, oh, the more momentum you have, the further back it sends you. So there's a lot of cool jumps in this game. There's a lot of interesting routing. There's also an interesting strat where you die while getting the goal tape. You can hit start and select to automatically like give up or die in the level, and this is used to, I guess, shorten the cutscene that happens in between Mick and Mac giving each other high fives. They still, don't worry, give each other high fives. That
There's
part's
no
not cut
loss
out.
of the high fives.
Yeah, but it seems like it's like a black screen for like a couple seconds before that. It must shorten it in some way to do that.
So I think what it does is, usually when you cut the goal tape, you just stand there for a second while a jingle plays, and then you do the whole high five thing.
Skips that.
I don't think that that part's replaced, because that's just a black screen now. But what's different is that before, what would happen is wherever you ended up on screen is where sort of the high five took place from. Your friend would come from off screen and meet you at that spot.
Oh.
And when you die, I think what happens is it assumes that you're all the way to the right, so the high five happens as far right as possible, and it ends it just like a second earlier.
I really like the high five. So
I really am a big fan of the high fives.
Yeah, I feel like we need.
If we had lost that, this might have gotten a lower power ranking.
Yeah. So, other than that, I mean, it's an interesting run to watch. I mean, we can't go kind of into all the details, but like we've said before, there's a lot of slippery physics. There's also very slippery physics in ice levels, so you're adding slip on slip. There's these anti-gravity sections where you're platforming upside down. There's a lot of kind of tight jumps and interesting things going on. So I like the run quite a bit. The boss fight at the end, I think, is fairly complicated as well. It's I think there's a cycle skip or something, because he got that, and that's why he's able to get world record. Also, as an encouragement to anybody speedrunning during this run, it's just funny. I think of all of us when I heard this. He's like second to last level, and he's like, PB's dead, or he's like, run's dead, there's no way to PB from here on out, and that's the world record video. So it's always funny to hear people say stuff like that like a minute before the run's over, because we make a mistake and we think there's no way we're gonna PB now. It's like, it was pretty funny.
And then he did.
And then he did. And then he has the world's record, the most record of the world,
which I think is good for him.
Yeah, that's good. So any last thoughts on any of these three games?
I think that it's kind of interesting. As much as these games are sort of posed as a bad games episode, I do think that all three of these have a lot of merit as speedruns.
Yeah,
which is really nice to see. If you look at the McDonald's video game lineup, they sort of dropped off of the map, whereas Burger King went on to make games like Sneak King, and other companies have made other promotional games. McDonald's sort of dropped off completely after their 2 Genesis games, which I think if I had made Global Gladiators, I would also get out of the video game business as well. But I think it's neat that of the, I would say, 4 legitimate McDonald's games, 3 of them are such great speedruns, really.
I mean, I would go beyond that. I mean, we put this in a bad games episode, and to be fair, me and you are so deep in the weeds, we don't know what's good and what's bad, and I get that. I think the only game I would say is Kuso is Donald Land, and it'd be hard for me to say it's bad, but it's definitely a Kuso game. Like, I don't know if that distinction is something that's available there.
Global
but like,
Gladiators is bad. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's just bad.
But out of the 3 that we're talking about mostly, like, they're good casual games too. Like, I think they're much better than you'd expect casually, especially MC Kids.
Yeah.
Like, I think MC Kids is legitimately like a 7 out of 10 NES title, like a lot of fun. You know, and the other games all have their own merits and are really interesting as well. So don't sleep on them just because they're licensed titles. They're all pretty cool games. Right?
Definitely.
So we'll go ahead and take a quick break, listen to some other fresh McDonald's music, and then we're going to answer your live Q&A.
All right, so we're going to answer a few of your listener Q&A. Before we get to the questions that were asked in the chat, thank you so much to everyone who's hanging out in the chat and dropping such great questions. I did want to start with one question that we actually got by email. Reminder that if you want to send us questions to be read on the episode, in addition to all the other places that we usually plug, we also receive questions at theframesavers@gmail.com. So please feel free to send us questions there. We do get them and we will read them. So
even if you don't know what episode we're talking about, you can ask more generic questions. These Q&A sections don't have to be specific to the episode. So yeah, something to keep in mind. We definitely love getting email as well. So
yeah, so Biscuit1337 asks, "Hola, John and Aw, thanks for everything you do with the podcast. I posed this question to the guys from the Warpworld podcast, and I was curious to see how your answers would differ given your focus on retro games. I know a lot of people immediately hate the idea of remakes and reimaginings of retro games due to preserving their nostalgia. That being said, what retro game would you have remade if you could choose any? My personal choice is Zelda 2 remade into the Metroidvania style, such as Super Metroid or Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Also, shout out to Xwater for his brilliant answer of Pokemon Snap. Criminally underrated game that needed a remake."
Good answer. That's a really good answer.
So thank you, Biscuit1337, for the...
Man, why'd we let him on the podcast? That's such a good answer. We're not going to have a good answer like that.
Yeah, Xwater was formerly on the Frame Savers, and now everyone's just going to be clamoring for him to come back with such...
I'm going to be like, I want Mega Man remade. That's what I always feel like I say anyways. So what do I want remade? Thanks for telling me this question before we recorded, by the way.
Oh, wait, yeah, no problem.
You didn't do that.
Yeah, I read this several days ago, so...
Secret Scout remake would be nice, you know.
Do we really want a remake of any Color Dreams games? Like, I would legitimately be down.
I want a multi-cart.
Okay, I want
a multi-cart signed by Moses himself.
First off, thank you, John, because I didn't have a good answer, and you've now given me a really good answer. I want a legitimate, quality remake RPG of Spiritual Warfare. I want a full-out...
That would be cool. Yep.
I want, like, a full-out...
A full Link to the Past for...
Lock, stock, and barrel RPG experience.
Link Between Worlds? Like, you want it to still be Zelda-like, or you want it to turn into RPG?
Oh, I'm sorry. I do want it to be like either
action adventure.
Yeah, sort of action adventure. Okay. I was thinking in my head like Secret of Mana style. Like you've got spells to cast, which are prayers, and you've got weapons and things. I want that.
This would be a really tough one to remake and do it well, but like Zombies Ate My Neighbors would be a good one. Like that game's like kind of just never returned, you know, and it was a really good game. Ghoul Patrol or whatever the sequel was didn't do very well.
What if they remade it like in the style of like Left 4 Dead, where you've got like a team of people who are working together, like you and your friends?
But it can't be like a standard zombie game. It's still got to be like an arcade 2D platformer for sure.
Yeah, but like what if you could have four people on the map working together
that would be
to
cool.
like hold off the zombies and save all the people? All right, now we've got an idea here. Did Ghoul Patrol have 2-player mode?
I don't know, but we don't need Xwater. I know that now.
Oh, that's really good.
We did it. We have ideas too.
Pokemon Snap sucks. Who thought of that idea?
What a dumb idea. No, that's just a random one that popped in my head. So, because I was thinking of Total Carnage, which is also a SNES game I like quite a bit. That's not anywhere near as good, but that was an arcade game. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a good one. So Kamikaze Cracker asks, what fast food restaurant deserves a video game that didn't get one? Conquest of the Chihuahua for Taco Bell.
Taco Bell got a video game.
What game? You're supposed to have listed all these in the advert games.
Well, they had the
I want a
Taco
3D. I want a full Elder Scrolls experience, but as the Chihuahua from Taco Bell.
It's funny that you mentioned that because the game was like a 3D dungeon crawler.
No.
Yeah, it was. It was Taco Bell. I can't remember the name of it. It's like Tasty Cave something. I don't remember. But it's an actual game that exists and has been speedrun as well.
Wow. So I guess I can't include that one. So why don't you go ahead first?
I think In-N-Out Burger, it should have been a racing game.
Why a racing game?
Because it's called In-N-Out Burger. They're like really fast in the drive-thru.
Oh, okay. What about a Chipotle video game?
What would the Chipotle video game be, John?
Maybe it should be a Chick-fil-A video game where you're the cow that says no more chicken or eat more chicken.
What's the name of the Taco Bell game?
See, now you're deep. See, I've already lost my co-host now. Once this happens, right now he's not with us anymore. His brain has moved on to wanting to know what the Taco Bell video game is. So now I've got to think of another one.
Taco Bell Tasty Temple Challenge is the name. All right, I'm done.
Tasty Temple Challenge. Is it a PC game?
Yeah, it was a PC game. It's like a dungeon crawler sort of Doom.
Do a blind race.
I'm in.
Okay, let's do it.
Tasty Temple Challenge. The gauntlet has been thrown down. It is on in many ways like Donkey Kong.
I mean, you're saying specifically fast food, so it could be, I mean, you could have the Colonel's chicken. You could have the cow that says eat more chicken from Chick-fil-A.
Could KFC actually have a good video game that's sort of like on message for them? Like, you don't want the Colonel chasing down chickens. That's not a good view.
Exactly. No, it wouldn't be good on message for them. That's the problem. The only enemy would be the chicken, which is also
that is bad optics for KFC. But what could you be? You could, I guess you'd be.
If you're talking about like just in general, like the food industry, like I think Red Bull should have some video games. I'm surprised it doesn't.
Actually, I'm surprised
it doesn't. Monster and stuff. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't have like a cool spot, but with Red Bull. But who knows? Okay, case 1111111 says, when is the Frame Savers episode of Glass Wings featuring the game developer?
I feel really bad for the game developer because I keep tweeting at him, asking him how or if he'll fix the game, and he's so apologetic and so tired of being bothered by me. There's really just no chance of this happening. He's like, I'm sorry, but if I knew how to fix the bug in the game, it wouldn't have a bug in the game. And I'm like, you know what? When you put it that way, that's actually a great point. So I kind of feel bad, and I probably won't bother him further going forward.
Okay, so Kamikaze also asks, do you believe these games either helped or hurt sales for McDonald's? Maybe introduced McDonald's to a younger crowd? I mean, we kind of talked about that earlier. You were talking about that study. I don't think these games had the popularity in the US, at least, that they had much of an impact, though, right? Like, I don't think they really, like, I think McDonald's advertising had a really profound impact on children, but I don't think these games in particular did very much for that.
I mean, the whole idea was just
knowing what these were.
The whole idea was brand awareness. I mean, I remember as a kid, like early internet, and General Mills had like a website with a bunch of Flash games on it.
Sure,
and you'd like go and play those, and it didn't make me more likely to play General Mills games, but there was probably like or more likely to eat General Mills cereal. I was already eating General Mills cereal, but it's like raising brand awareness. So
but what I'm saying is, I wasn't aware these games existed when they would have been relevant to me. They came out when I was a kid, and they didn't influence me as a kid. I didn't know. I never seen MC Kids or Treasureland Adventure. The only one of these games I maybe knew about was like Yonoid. Like, I played Yonoid for sure.
Right.
I played Cool Spot, but I never ran into these games, so I don't know if they like sold enough to actually kind of have that popularity.
Is there anything in these? So Epic asks, is there anything in these games that can approximate the sheer horror of the McDonald's themed playgrounds in the Famicom years? And he provides an image. I'm not going to put it on screen in case there are children watching. It's horrific.
I didn't see it. Should I open it?
Yes.
Okay, let's see.
I'll give John a moment to react organically.
Oh no, I didn't click it. I saw a link in our chat, and I was like, "Uh-oh, there's a link in our chat," and then I moved on emotionally.
Yeah, yikes, right? Yikes, big time yikes. So nice. I think there's probably some really spicy sprites in Donald Land that are pretty creepy. But no, literally nothing can compete with how horrific McDonald's playgrounds were in the late 80s, early 90s.
Sure. What else we got here? Do we have any other questions here? Oh, which is superior? Space Scout 2455 asks, Shamrock Shake or McRib? Shamrock Shake for sure.
What is the flavor of it? I've never had a Shamrock Shake. What is the flavor?
Milkshake. Just a milkshake.
Yeah, that's the right answer.
Yeah, of course.
And I promise, mark my words, next time the McRib comes back, they bring it back, whatever that means, I will try it again. I will have forgotten that I do not like it, and I will order it.
It's usually in March they do the Shamrock Shakes for St. Patrick's Day and stuff. I don't know. I don't think I've had a McRib since like maybe I was a kid. I'm not. I don't know. I'm good. Crazy Awesome kind of asks an interesting speedrunning question. He says, "What do you think of legitimate releases that run faster than the original release?" So, for example, he's talking about in the Kirby Dream collection. I think Kirby's Dream Land 2 runs faster than Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy. So both versions are allowed for speedrunning Kirby's Dream Land. They're the same leaderboard. So that's kind of a complicated question. That's like a leaderboard question, I feel like.
Yeah, it's always tough because there's this natural instinct to not ban things. Like, I think a lot of speedrunners, I mean, there's a natural instinct to ban things as speedrunners, but I think that there's this desire to not put too many rules on things, but at the same time, it always really sucks, at least the notion of, like, old speedruns that are good quality get invalidated by lesser quality speedruns just because they're played on a better, newer version.
Yeah.
And so I think that instinct tends to prevail. In my opinion, like, for instance, the argument with, you know, why do all the Super Mario 64 speedrunners play on Nintendo 64 when the Virtual Console version's faster? Why do they keep the leaderboard separate? I like the idea of playing on the original release so that you don't have to, like, start comparing disparate versions. It's a complicated issue.
I agree with you. That's how I feel about it.
There's so much nuance to it. I mean,
especially when the versions are released really far apart. I think that's the key for me. Like, if it's a GameCube game that also came out on Wii and the Wii version's faster, it's like, okay, well, it came out for both consoles. But when a game comes out for, say, the Game Boy and then is re-released 30 years later in another format, like on a disc that comes with a collection of Kirby games or something, like, in my opinion, that's like, you're 30 years away now at this point. You're talking about two different things.
Right.
Whereas it's like, oh, this, because there's a lot of games that were released on GameCube and Wii, or Wii and Wii U, or, you know, Wii U and Switch. And so, like, when there are those crossover games, usually there's a faster version. I think that in that case, it's just like, go with the faster version.
Yeah, that's perfectly
but
fine.
like when it's a remake or a re-release from something a long time ago, I'm all for separate leaderboards in that case.
Yeah, PlayStation 1 games being played on PlayStation 2, I can live with that.
Yeah.
Different versions.
That's another tough one too. Like, PSP games a lot of times run faster, and a lot of those games were on PlayStation 1. So it's like, well, nobody wants to buy a PSP for the most part and look down when they're streaming and get the equipment. So it's like, you know, it's a tough question.
I think the takeaway here is that the whole argument in the first place is a lose-lose for everyone involved. And I think that in general, it's good for individual leaderboards to make the decision that's right for them. If it's not an already heavily populated leaderboard, then play on the fastest version. If you've got a lot of runners that are really high quality and the difference between the versions is too great, then sure, keep the versions separate, or don't run on the new version. Or
you got to take it case by case for sure.
Yeah, it's tough.
But it's a tough issue when it comes to certain games. I think that's most of our questions. One question, Space Cow 2455 asks, did TG do better this time dealing with Billy Mitchell? And I'm going to use that as a segue to say that's not normally a topic we would talk about, but you could check out our friends at the Warp World podcast. They probably brought that up at some point this week. Big news about Billy Mitchell getting removed from Twin Galaxies. So you can check them out at podcast.warp.world. They cover more current events and stuff like that, so they'll probably say something. But, you know, cheating in games, it sucks. That's my opinion.
Yeah, we've tried to find ways to broach the topic. There might, I'm not going to spoil it, there might be an episode in the future with a certain guest eventually where we might lightly delve into the topic, but it's so hard to talk about in this context. I mean, we don't really get into that sort of drama. We dislike cheating. That's our abject opinion.
It is. It has been a really interesting saga, and it's something I don't know a ton about. Like, I've never seen King of Kong. I didn't really know who Billy Mitchell was, so I only really got into the Todd Rogers stuff a little bit because I actually speed ran Dragster for fun.
Yeah,
we
have talked a little bit about the whole saga. My only comment I will say about it, to avoid diving too deep into it, is that Twin Galaxies, I think a lot of people have sort of their goodwill for Twin Galaxies has dried up, and a lot of times it's viewed as too late to necessarily mend the fence. So yeah,
we'll see. Other people we can plug, by the way. I think that's the last I think of our Q&A. I think we're good there. There's other people though that support us, so you can support us on patreon.com/theframesavers. That's what really helps us pay for our expenses for things and stuff. And trust me, it is not a lot of margin that we're making here on this thing. It all goes back into the podcast. We just did the taxes on it this week, so the numbers wouldn't overwhelm you. It really does help us, though. The money we do get, it does cover everything that we need. So we really appreciate the people who help us. Covers our hosting fees. It covers our getting our website, getting our graphics made. We're getting emotes made for those of you who have decided to subscribe on Twitch. Those will hopefully be there next time we do.
Yeah, we've got a lot of new projects coming in the works, and the money that you help support us
Absolutely.
all goes directly back into feeding those projects, ways that we can continue to improve our brand, and by doing that, improving the speedrun community any way possible. So
absolutely. So some people give us $25 a month, and we want to give them a shout out. Tina Hacks gives us $25 a month on patreon.com. You can follow her on twitch.tv/Tina Hacks. She runs Shantae, Wonderboy, FF6. She's going to be running Shantae and the Pirate's Curse at GDQ coming up, so definitely give her a follow. We've got Mr. Pizak, MRPZAK. He does classic retro speed runs. Hasn't streamed in a while, so go bully him about that. Kip is twitch.tv/KIPP. He's a Super Metroid speedrunner, and he hosts this chat every other Thursday where they talk about strats and have top runners show you how to do different stuff in Super Metroid. So if you're somebody interested in learning that game, or you're just a fan of that game, definitely go check out Kip, KIPP. And then Drex, our buddy, DDRREEXX. That's one of each. He runs Pugsy and does a bunch of late night stuff. He's a chill streamer and mostly does speedrunning, but also some casual play across a bunch of different genres.
yeah, he was trying to learn Global Gladiators, but
I saw that. Yeah,
I don't think that'll end up happening. Also, as of this episode coming out in the audio version, he lost to me in Keysathon. We're doing a race of Pugsy. So either this comment right here will age very poorly, or I just called my shot, and I'm really happy with either.
Wow. Yeah, because you're not going to get called out. People will just forget. I don't know. I think you're setting yourself up perfectly here. I like.
Yeah,
I think you're a smart guy. You'd do something like that.
Yeah,
he's crafty.
Yeah.
So where could people find you if they want to find you streaming the games?
Oh, you shouldn't do that. But if you feel so motivated, you could check me out on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at AuthorBlues. Where could people find you though, John?
Where can I find me?
Well, you can find you at home, I guess.
We're always looking for ourselves, aren't we?
Look in a mirror.
Isn't that really? Mirror to our souls. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at John Carls. YouTube is John Carls1. Also, you can find our buddy and pal Brian Morgenthaler, who produces this podcast, at BMarks TV on Twitter and Twitch. Big shout out to him. Space Cow, thank you so much. Space Cow 2455 for helping organize the live Q&A while we're here. And any last thoughts about McDonald's based games? Usually whenever I love Super Size Me as a movie. I love that movie. I've watched it like 6 times. Every time I watch it, I have to eat McDonald's. And like now I'm feeling that, like, I feel like McDonald's is kind of like Beetlejuice, where if you say it enough times, then you want it, or it appears.
Right.
Does that make sense? That's how I feel right now.
Has that been your case? Are you gonna are you gonna run away from this podcast right now and go get some chicken McNuggets?
I'm not against it.
You want to make a McNugget run with me?
Yeah, maybe they did exactly what their purpose was. I played McDonald's games today and talked about it, and now all of a sudden, kind of want to McDouble.
So you're more aware of McDonald's now. That's good.
Yeah, their brand awareness has been raised due to our podcast, especially, I'm sure. So yeah, definitely check out these games. Cool speed runs, fun casual games, and stuff that you probably would normally pass over because it's got a McDonald's arches on it, but they're actually good games. So yeah, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah, go play video games and then eat McDonald's food. McDonald's, if you want to sponsor us, let us know. Bye.
Yeah, bye. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.